Hey guys, so the Kim Soo-hyun scandal is just getting messier and messier by the day. You have people coming forward on each side, making statements, and in their making of a statement, they're usually just by default saying that somebody else is not telling the truth, and therefore that person has to respond back, defend themselves. When they defend themselves, they're making another accusation. So it's devolving into accusations against each other, and now they're even going so low as slut shaming. So before we get to the whole slut shaming that, yes, does involve the late Kim Sae-ron and also one of her lawyers that's helping out in this case, it's been very interesting to read all of your comments on the videos. It really sparks a lot of different emotions and a lot of different life experiences that people bring to this story, and then also how they react given the information that they have at the time. And I just wanted to kind of go through some of the polarities to see, like, what is it really that this case is about at the end of the day, and what is it triggering as we're going through it. Now, first of all, the whole thing about whether it's true, like who's telling the truth about the relationship. And the tricky part about this situation is that there is no waiting for the authorities to do the investigation or find out. There's no waiting for a judge, because it's not going to court to just talk about what age did they start dating. That is for us, if we care, to decide in the public based on the evidence that each side is giving. Because again, the limited cases that have been filed in this situation, so on the surface it looks like there's a big old lawsuit to try to find the truth, it's mainly about defamation. It's mainly about whether this was a malicious attack. And even in a roundabout, circuitous way, the Kim Soo-hyun side is also trying to put in some sort of violation of like a stalking act. So there is no case that the judge is going to look through the evidence and decide like, yup, yet you did or did not start dating her when she was a minor. That is not up for the court to decide. If that enters in the whole legal court system, it would be a byproduct of the case of defamation or injunctions, like basically on the reporting of this, the bringing this out to the public. It would only be a side issue, if that, of that legal case. So we have to determine what is true. Of course, there's the whole question of whether this should have been public or private. There's the question of whether Kim Sae-ron's parents should have protected her better. So if they had protected her better, then none of this would have happened, and therefore it's really the parents' fault. Other people are saying it doesn't matter, what the parents could or could not have done in that moment, because if it is true, a predator is a predator. Whether it matters how old they were, some people don't even, they don't even, it's split. Didn't really realize it would be so split. Whether it's Kim Soo-hyun's fault at all. And that's the other tricky thing, because what the parents are asking for essentially is not anything that they're going to take to court, nor do they want to take to court or could take to court. If you believe the parents and they don't have this underlying agenda to try to get money, a lot of you guys saying like this is a money grab, not a grab for trying to get some justice in their own hearts. But if you believe the parents, they just want to have an acknowledgement and public apology that, yes, you had an influence on our daughter by dating her when she was so young, and that had an effect on her final choice. But legally, we've already went over this. Even if Kim Soo-hyun is found out to have lied about when he started to date Kim Sae-ron and whether that dating actually involved consummation at the time. The laws were different, so that would have been totally legal. Also, legally, you can't hold somebody accountable for your decision to make the final choice because they were heartbroken over you. So nobody's really trying to take that to court, but at the same time, it's more of then it turns into an issue of like the court of our hearts, or more than I think public opinion, just how we feel about this situation depending on what we believe. But none of this is actually meant to be, oh, well, we have to legally or criminally punish Kim Soo-hyun for underage dating and having an effect psychologically on Kim Sae-ron. That is never, ever, ever going to be in the courtroom, because there is no way for it to be in the courtroom. But for me, what the really big issue is, because after looking through all of the different facets, the one thing that I'm still a stickler on is whether or not Kim Soo-hyun tried to shut her mouth. That, I think, should be the focus on the side of Kim Se-ron's family and also Garo's Sero Research Institute. The fact that Kim Se-ron's family and Garo's Sero Research Institute are not the most reliable parties cast a lot of doubt in general. For me, the way that they could go to a place where I think it's actually relevant for the overall picture is whether or not there was abuse of power and using connections to try to shut Kim Se-ron's mouth up. And it looked like she did not want to say anything. However, if Kim Soo-hyun was guilty, that guilt just keeps ticking in his mind. And in order to resolve that imbalance, because actually it looked like Kim Se-ron was not being vengeful back, like not being crazy back. It'd be easier, actually, if you read the psychological literature, it's easier for somebody who feels guilty if the other person is like trying to, get revenge or attack them back, because it feels like they would be able to have some relief over it. But if she's kind of not really trying to get revenge and it seems like she's being more forgiving, the guilt eats away. And in order to resolve that, you try to destroy the thing that's giving you guilt, even though she's trying to be all demure and mindful over it. Because had she not been demure and mindful, a lot of this would have played out differently, and we would have heard about this while she was still alive, and she would have been, taking him to the cleaners. But the thing is, did she want to? We don't know whether she wanted to really do it or not. It looked like she didn't want to do it, but even if she did, does it look like to me that, yes, he was exerting pressure on her to shut her mouth and destroy her as much as possible so that she does not threaten his business? And this is a big, big business with many, many mouths to feed, as he said himself. Did they try to shut Kim Se-ron's mouth up with that super high-powered law firm with all the connections into entertainment and political world? Did they blacklist her from the industry, which she said that she felt like she was being blacklisted? Did they try to exert more pressure on her and make her penniless and really focus on how to try to pay off the $700,000 to gold medalists, and perhaps by leaving the industry in order to do so, planting spies on her? That manager that looked like it was a conduit straight back into gold medalists with a lot of information looks extremely shady, and it's something that only, like, if you're really guilty and you're kind of scared that Kim Se-ron's just going to spill all the beans and then ruin your whole image and your business and all of your advertising contracts and all of your streaming specials, it makes sense to put a spy there. And is that why she was so desperate to get a marriage visa to move to the United States? This whole thing about the shotgun wedding with the New York husband makes a lot more sense to me when I think that, wow, she even said, they're making it impossible for me to earn a living in Korea. A lot of the times, if you can, a lot of Korean people dream of just escaping Korea. Usually they don't really like it after they think that, oh gosh, Korea is horrible. And there are, yes, stressful aspects of it, but I've seen a lot of people, they move and then they're like, oh, actually, I'm willing to put up with all the crap in Korea because, Korea, I love Korea. But I could also see that she was so desperate to find a different avenue. And if you want to move to another country, you need a visa. But the fastest way to do that, get married. And so that makes a lot more sense to me why she would also have that as an impetus for her to have a shotgun wedding with New York husband, and not to mention really just desperate to replace that feeling of security. And so to me, the real issue at stake is not necessarily whether, it has PDF vibes or not, even though that's a big issue. And if it's not true, then the family should be punished to the full extent of the law. And that is mainly what this lawsuit is about from Kim Soo-hyun's side. That if they are lying to take him down, then he's gonna sue back. And that is what is in the lawsuit. And it's not necessarily like, whether they dated at that age or not, or whether he was responsible for her deciding to leave this world or not. To me, it's more about whether or not he really did try to shut up a person and unnecessarily. That's the sad part of this situation, where she looked like, the problem is she looked like she wouldn't do anything to harm Kim Soo-hyun, except if she gets harmed back. You try to put the pressure on her, she's gonna clap back a bit, but she's not gonna clap loudly. It looked like she wants to know that I can, but I won't. And still, that's a problem. And to me, that is the biggest red flag that lingers here of, in a situation like this with so many millions of dollars at stake, will people try to eliminate a threat? So this hasn't been that long. Going back in the timeline, just a quick review. Kim Sae-ron passed away at the age of 25 at her home in Seoul on February 16th. The family of Kim Sae-ron 11 days later on March 27th held that press conference by proxy via their lawyers and Mr. Garo's man to demand an apology from Kim Soo-hyun, and then threatened the release, kind of a drip release of saucier and saucier photos, texts, and videos of Kim Soo-hyun. Kim Soo-hyun, 4 days later on the 31st of March, held a press conference and denied that they had dated when she was a minor, admitted that they did date when she was an adult, and that it was a very brief relationship. And then he took legal action against Garo's man and the family, saying you guys are not telling the truth and you're trying to take me down. Now, Garo, I think they are dropping the ball here on this, because I think they should do a one and done. They claim that they have, and to be fair to Garo actually a little bit, is that they claim that they've already done the one and done thing to prove that they are telling the truth. This was an underage relationship, and they came out with more text messages and metadata, which we'll go over, saying, kind of put that to bed, saying that this is the truth. But Kim Soo-hyun now is on the offensive, taking legal action, saying that that is not the case, and you are totally making me suffer, especially financially. But I think Garo really needs to open the investigation a little bit more to see whether Kim Soo-hyun had this ill intent if there is evidence on that, because at this point I think it's much more relevant to this storyline if there was a push, because just calling for the debt, that's not illegal, and it's just more crossing this like, well, if they had that agreement kind of situation, well, if she was in that state. But the actions that Kim Soo-hyun is taking, not necessarily illegal. However, whether if there is some illegality of using law firms, using public opinion campaigns to target Kim Sae-ron, I think that is a much more relevant discussion, and whether that really happened. And that is an area where I believe Mr. Garo's man would find it amenable to his agenda of, remember, Mr. Garo's man's agenda is really to take down the law firm of Kim Soo-hyun and all of the political and media network that's tied to Kim Soo-hyun's law firm. So Kim Soo-hyun's law firm reportedly is more on the power elite of the Democratic Party side. Mr. Garo's man is far right, so he wants to attack that whole political class, and this whole Kim Sae-ron, Kim Soo-hyun vehicle to that was just so perfect for him. But instead of continuously just like dripping these videos, like, him like taste testing her new recipe for spicy chicken, hello, let's bring out the real sauce and see if that law firm, start with the law firm, Mr. Karo-man. If you think that they're such a opponent of yours, start with them and see if they really did do something so horrible to Kim Sae-ron behind the scenes. That should really raise the fear quotient of everybody in Korea that, you can be taken out. Just little law firm. You just need to pay the retainer, and maybe your mama got to sell her house, to be the sixth member of a K-pop girl group. But as long as you can pay the retainer, you can get whatever you want, or so you think. And that is essentially what's being sold in a lot of these proposals. And it's a little bit scary for that to be, something that you can just order up. Okay, so let's get to the slut shaming. This is not really nice. So Jin-ho, of course, he had that injunction against him saying that you gotta stop reporting on Kim Sae-ron, but he's like, see you next Tuesday, I'm doing it anyway. And so he's been releasing these videos, and a lot of them are not him on camera, and it totally gives me like AI vibes, but who knows. But he did recently release this thing where like, oh, well, Kim Sae-ron's had like 5 boyfriends, and the boyfriend, status of Kim Soo-hyun was her XXXXX. So basically like making her look like a hoe, saying like, oh, well, Kim Soo-hyun is just the XXXXXXX boyfriend of Kim Sae-ron. And then to also suggest that how could that relationship, like 6 boyfriends ago, still exert a pressure on her now. So we're looking at what he said, and he's really, positing the question, was it really Kim Soo-hyun's fault? And to this, I would say, just because somebody's had 5 boyfriends afterwards, does that mean that they've forgotten about the boyfriend that was six boyfriends ago? Most of the time, I would say yes. However, in this situation and the way that the family is, I think, arguing, but not arguing well, essentially like Kim Soo-hyun was the start of the downward spiral, and that every other boyfriend, the way it looks to me, it's like every other relationship was just a desperate attempt to sort of replace in her heart and her feelings what she had with Kim Soo-hyun, or to fill a hole that was left by Kim Soo-hyun. So that's the tricky part of this, because not everybody would feel like, oh, well, I broke up with Kim Soo-hyun, that's the beginning of, my downward spiral. It could be nothing. It'd be like, meh, yeah, move on. Of course, I've had 5 other relationships after that. There's no, totally forgot. That could be somebody's experience. On the other hand, I think it's also could be somebody's experience where, it was a whole downward spiral, and you can see from the relationships that she's had, especially if she's willing to do a shotgun wedding to a New York husband that she just met, like 2 months before, that these are not relationships that are really fulfilling. It does look like a desperate, a plug back in and hope for the best. And true to form, I think from the same evidence, people go in 2 different directions. So Jin-ho presented this evidence saying about like New York husband is the reason for a lot of this psychological turmoil. Therefore, it's not Kim Soo-hyun's fault. I look at the same evidence as, wow, this New York husband really was not the main psychological thing. It was way back. However, I'm not saying that you can blame Kim Soo-hyun legally, because there's no way to blame him legally as like, oh, well, he broke my heart, therefore I'm doing this. Although in reality, it could be that way. But legally, nobody's arguing for that legally. And I think that's why if you believe what the parents are saying, that's what they want as like an acknowledgement. And then if you even don't believe what they're saying, like, yeah, throw some money on that. Hey, that's usually what the court does to... you can't really sue for apologies, but you can sue for money. But in this case, they can't sue for that kind of situation. So maybe that is what they're trying to do. But Jin-ho said that, he released some of these conversations that Kim Se-ron had and some letters. And in this video, Jin-ho, the guy that is the YouTuber that seems to be on Kim Soo-hyun's side, reporting his side and kind of, going into the groove with this. He said Kim Se-ron had to choose to marry a husband in New York, which she didn't want to do due to the extreme loneliness she faced amid the weight of being the head of a household and hardships in life. She has had a total of 5 ex-boyfriends since breaking up with Kim Soo-hyun, an athlete, a singer, a part-time coworker, an idol trainee, and a New York husband. Okay, laundry list, it really does screaming like, slut shaming. However, the main point that he's trying to make is that, she's already had so many relationships, like Kim Soo-hyun's effect is nothing, it's petered out, and actually we should really look at her last relationship with with New York husband, because that was very abusive and volatile, and he is referring to conversations that Kim Se-ron allegedly had with her idol trainee boyfriend, who she kept in contact with and she would pour her heart out to, including in text messages, and complain allegedly about the New York husband. And because she still had this like psychological connection to the boyfriend number 4, and that is what Jin-ho is saying, like boyfriend number 4 is showing that New York husband, which would be relationship number 5, was very hard on her psychologically, including that the New York husband was sending her fortune-telling videos from shamans on YouTube. Where are these shamans coming up again? Saying that, Kim Se-ron is bad and she should already be, off this dimension, and that it seemed to show that she suffered a lot of conflict with New York husband. All right, so now why is it getting messy? Because New York husband had to clap back and said, like, look, I have a letter from Kim Se-ron, and this wasn't about so much conflict, and she poured her heart out in this letter, and it seemed like she was, very much like mature about it, and just like not really blaming him. This was a 2-page letter to New York husband, and said things like, our short and intense relationship ended like this. I think we both felt and lived through many emotions and adapted to it in a short period of time. I loved it even though that overwhelming feeling was there. But if we had gotten to know each other a little more slowly and had spent more time together before deciding to get married, would it have ended so easily? It wouldn't have. I was too impatient. Was everything my greed? Could it not be eternal? I think that all I had were such thoughts. I thought that nothing is eternal. The present is not in touch with eternity, but when something ends, it becomes eternity. When a person dies, they disappear forever. When a relationship ends, they end forever. And when I thought that maybe the things that make up the world are not living beings, but things that are eternally dead, I once thought that I wanted to die. I wanted to be your eternal person. At first it was revenge, and then it was about building something bigger together, but in the end, I ended up hurting you. I think I was lonely because you weren't by my side. Even when I met your family, when I was having a hard time, when I was really sad, you weren't by my side. So she is blaming New York husband for not being more there next to him, not matching the energy that she was bringing to the relationship, which in some ways could be unfair to New York husband, which she does acknowledge that she was really hoping that he would be her eternal person and she would be his eternal person, and how much weight she puts on relationships, saying that even a breakup is eternity. Like, so it, to me, it does signal that that relationship she had when she was so young really impressioned on her a mark that she would think about that forever. And when thinking about this, if I were in Kim Sero-on's shoes and imagined from the way that I interpret what had happened to her, I could really see how she was in each relationship putting too much of an expectation into the relationship because she wasn't able to fully resolve that traumatic experience with Kim Soo-hyun. And I've seen this a lot where, you know, when you break up with somebody, everyone's saying like, oh, it's going to be better. You know, you'll find somebody better. And this was all meant to be like, it's going to be so much better. That's what a lot of people try to say, like, you know, express, you know, Dr. Phil drive-through advice. And what happens when it doesn't, though? What happens when it doesn't get better, or even if it's not immediately better? You've waited for years and you've tried relationship after relationship, and it is not making up for you taking the high road at the time of the actual traumatic event. And so I could kind of see that, you know, at some certain point, maybe you should always think that Kim Seo-ron would be like, okay, I am done trying to take the high road and it's unfair for the next relationship guy to make up for what Kim Soo-hyun allegedly did to her, how she's feeling, that she would just want to go, let's go back to the original source of the drama and let's have it out. Because it looks like she also looked like she was a bit fiery with the way that, you know, we have seen her performance, but even in her messages, she does draw boundaries. She is not like a total pushover. It's just that she was just so young. And Garo did release a new video with an original Kakao Talk conversation, allegedly with the metadata that refuted Kim Soo-hyun's claim during his press conference that all of these messages were manipulated. And so they were able to find a message that was from April 2018. That would be right before Kim Seo-ron turned 18. And it was a message while Kim Soo-hyun was doing his military service, and she was just saying like, look, when you miss me, oh, I am easily reachable, you're easily reachable, but when I need you, you're always absent. And so it bothers me and makes me uncomfortable that I can't contact you. Because remember, there were also the other messages that we saw where he like is ghosting her, giving her excuses of like why he didn't show up to their date. And she said, but if you don't make an effort, I won't meet you anymore. So she was drawing the line. And then, you know, this message was, I think, yeah, before then he tried to then love bomb her again and make up for it. But apparently during that time, though, according to Kim Soo-hyun's side, even though now he acknowledged that that video of him, trying out her recipe real late at night, past 10 p.m. with soju on the table, and then karaokeing in her room at like 1 a.m., that they were still just friends at that point. Okay, now let's go to the slut shaming of the lawyer, because I found this hilarious. So that lawyer that, had like the bright colors and everything like that, helping out this case, saying that he represents a group that helps celebrities who are going through hardships or have been wronged. Well, Mr. Jin-ho is saying like, look, Mr. Lawyer, back in 2005, why did you go to Ben Hur Motel with a 19-year-old minor? What you do at that motel, and when did you divorce your wife? When did you remarry? So he is totally trying to slut shame the lawyer and bringing out the receipts of Ben Hur Motel, which of course I had to look up. It is in Seoul in a very central location, 2.5 star rating on TripAdvisor out of 5. So, not the highest ratings, but yes, motels like these, they call them love motels. You've probably already been through the lesson in Korea about accommodations. It is for loving, but at the same time, it could also be a very cheap tourist alternative in very central areas of Seoul. So you see, a mixture of people use them, and it often comes with quirky features that you can't really get at hotels. Like sometimes like these places will have like a desktop computer that you can use. Whirlpool tub is a little sketchy, but at Ben Hur, if you look at the photos, they have a popcorn machine in the lobby. Well, as of that picture was a few years old, so I don't know if they still have the popcorn machine in the lobby, but that's kind of cool, right? So Jin-ho is accusing Mr. Lawyer Man of going to this motel with this girl who actually apparently did press some charges for sexual harassment, a Korean Canadian girl, and then Mr. Jin-ho is saying like, well, y'all saying like there are parents of Kim Sae-ron, consider the parents. And then so Jin-ho is clapping back on behalf of Kim Soo-hyun's side, saying like, well, doesn't this Canadian girl also have parents that, would feel bad about this? So this is like some, heavy kind of slut shaming. And yes, some of these motels have some colorful names. And why Ben Hur? Like, obviously, I think this is trying to attract a older clientele, because Ben Hur, that 1959 movie with Charlton Heston, had a huge cultural impact in Korea at the time. Apparently, it was one of the first movies that you can see in Korea in color and in CinemaScope. And the themes of Ben Hur, about this, Ben Hur being a rich Jewish prince and merchant living in first century Jerusalem, who then gets betrayed by his friend, but his friend was on like the other side of the political world, like part of the Roman military, betrayed him, and then so this dude had to fight back. Those kind of themes, I guess, really impressed Korean people, and they even made a musical out of it, original Korean musical of Ben Hur in, I believe, in the past decade or so, and then it kind of premiered. I think 2017 was the first premiere. So anyhow, that's the only reason why I think it'd be called the Ben Hur Motel. Now, Jin-ho continues to bring up receipts, and when he does bring up his receipts, he is now then creating a situation where then another person has to clap back again. But remember the pub owner, but just to give both sides of the issue, the pub owner who said that, look, I have heard Kim Sae-ron cry, talk about her situation, and I do believe that her final choice was 70% Kim Soo-hyun, 25% Lee Jin-ho, and 5% her New York partner. Remember how Lee Jin-ho and the Kim Soo-hyun side is trying to paint this picture that no, this is probably like 95-99% abusive New York husband fault for putting her in this mental state, and then New York husband saying like, no, not at all. But not only that, about this pub owner, Jin-ho is accusing the pub owner of changing his tune because he said that the pub owner said Kim Se-ron was not the type to be emotionally shaken by Jin-ho's video. She had a strong mental state and she suffered zero impact at the time. Now, I think that, yes, you can't prove like what she was thinking and whether she is resilient or not, but I think that's also a leap of faith for Jin-ho to conveniently take, because she could in front of other people not react and feel like, no, it doesn't bother me, and say that all that kind of stuff, and then break down at home the way that she had described herself. On the other hand, Jin-ho is also right that if this is true, that this is what the pub owner said, and if it's verifiable that's what he said, well, that is what the pub owner said. Now, just to top it all off, this is the cherry on top of a whipped cream, but this cherry might be a little bit boring for you all unless you guys are really interested in money and tax evasion and stock manipulation. So this is getting more messy, with Kim Soo-hyun now being investigated over tax evasion that may directly involve Kim Se-ron. So essentially, there is some merit to this discussion now that the tax authorities have officially launched an investigation into Kim Soo-hyun's parent company, because if it gets to that state, most people see that as an indication that there's something there. Now, essentially, this has to deal with stock manipulation situation that involves a very prominent after-school tutoring academy, and I believe that it has just expanded so that it's online as well as offline. So a very big thing, and the major investor in it is Kim Soo-hyun's parent company. And the accusation is that somehow they use stock manipulation to make a share like $1 go up to $10, like really rapidly in a very short period of time, and then fall back again. So it looked like there was like a stock pumping, and then the people who knew what they were doing would sell at the top, and then the people who bought on the way up lost a lot of money. But the other interesting thing about this is that Kim Se-ron had the shares. Remember we said that she had shares in some investment that she sold to pay for some of the penalties against her. But now it's looking as if it's a investigation into whether they actually just used Kim Se-ron's name to assist, so she wasn't necessarily actively involved. She could have just said fine, in order to pay for my debt, you can use my name, set up an account, you guys do what you do, I won't look at it. Or she could have totally just been actively involved or not. But in any event, she had 100,000 shares and then it dropped to 66,000 shares. So that looks like a situation where the person controlling it is not Kim Se-ron. The person controlling it would control the very big stock holdings of this, and then in order to manipulate the price, you buy and sell a lot at the same time. But if it was all from Kim Soo-hyun's account, it looks like, oh, well, Kim Soo-hyun is manipulating the stock. But if it was a bunch of different people and you just basically make an account in their name and you have the logins for the account, and you just do whatever you do to manipulate the stock, it looks a little bit less obvious. But I don't know, this seems a little bit they're so close. Won't they get caught? So this is what's being investigated, and this is what Mr. Karusero Man is throwing out there now in this situation. So Karusero Man's side says that Kim Soo-hyun totally used Kim Se-ron yet again in this shady stock manipulation scheme by taking her social security number, setting up a financial investment account, and then using it to try to pump and dump a stock. And Kim Soo-hyun's side saying look, you guys are just continuously saying untrue things about me and therefore I'm going after you. This is all false. I did not date her when she was a minor. I had no role in the way that she felt, so, to make her eventual choice about how she ended her existence on the earth. And that, you guys are making this kind of like fraudulent claim. They're going after the auntie. They say like she's a fake aunt and she, we can't find her. She's like a ghost aunt. And so this is getting really messy because each side, when they're trying to make these assertions, are creating assertions that are in direct conflict with somebody else's assertions. So this is a lot of red flags when the things don't match. They don't like line up. And so it makes it even more of a situation where it looks like whoever is lying really, really big. And that's kind of scary about how that, is going to end up. All right, guys, what do you think? Remember to put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.